This is the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast, the podcast where we look at our times through the lens of faith and leadership, character, and history. I'm recording this podcast a few days into March 2026, which is significant because on the last day of February 2026, February 28th, the United States, Israel, and some of its allies struck Iran. I believe this is an historic moment. I believe we will be living in the wake of this decision for quite some time, and I want to help frame your understanding of it, add some thoughts, and certainly, as I do in D.C. and other places, help inform those who are decision makers in anything related to this situation. I think you already know the history. Since 1979, there has been in Iran a Shiite extremist Muslim administration, a regime which has become the primary, one of the most significant purveyors of terrorism in the world. When you think of 200 Marines dying in Beirut, that's Iran. When you think of American diplomats being captured and tortured, one particular man who I had a lot of affection for, Mr. Buckley, that's Iran. When you think of the disaster in Gaza, Israel gives over territory to the Palestinians to let them run it for themselves. Iran moves its client terrorist organization Hamas into the region. It becomes a terrorist region and thus leads to the bloodshed of October 7th and a lot of other bloodshed, by the way. When you think of many terrorist actions, much bloodshed, many Americans killed. When you think of an oppressive state, when you think of Hezbollah, when you think of Hamas, when you think of those incursions, the bloodshed from those organizations, all of this is Iran. So I have believed for a long time that America, one of the world's main superpowers, if not the main superpower, should not have been so soft on Iran. I'm not a hawk. I don't like bloodshed. I've traveled in the Middle East, love the people of Iran. Of course, work closely with the Kurds, as you've heard more times than you probably wanted to in this podcast. And I don't like seeing people devastated by the thousands, murdered by the tens of thousands. But that has been going on in Iran. So I think you know what's led up to this. The U.S., having been increasingly incensed by Iran since October 7th, and especially as Iran has become weaker through international sanctions, its economy has eroded, it has not softened, it has not appealed to the West, it has instead increased its terrorist activity. And the one thing it most wants to do is to complete work on nuclear weapons, nuclear facilities. This has absolutely been at the heart of the negotiations between the West and Iran. And the fact is that Iran was intransigent, no question about it. Iran's last proposal in the back and forth with the West about nuclear weapons is they wanted to preserve thousands of centrifuges and be allowed 20% uranium enrichment. Well, that basically means they have a nuclear program. And this is a country that can't be trusted with a nuclear program. Again, I want to say the people are awesome. The government is satanic in the truest sense of what that word might mean. Even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not religious, even if you don't believe in a devil, if you're talking about the evil end of the spectrum of nations, there's no question that Iran is on it. So all of that to say, the U.S., the West, had been trying to negotiate with Iran. They had been warned. We moved the Gerald R. Ford into the region. Again, I want to urge you to, at some point, get a little knowledgeable at how powerful these great big aircraft carriers are. It's like moving multiple military installations into a region. 5,000 personnel, firepower larger than what we've used in some previous wars in history. Pretty stunning. We moved them into the region. We told Iran we were coming. We told them they needed needed to negotiate. We told them that we would strike them. And they know, quite frankly, and I'm saying this with a smile on my face, a little bit of humor, they know that Donald Trump doesn't mess around. He's a little bit unhinged. He'll do it. He'll actually do what other presidents have talked about doing but have not been willing to do it. Other presidents, by the way, enabled Iran, the Obama administration in particular, by unfreezing assets to the tune of billions of dollars in Western banks. Iranian funds frozen because the Iranians kept misbehaving. The Obama administration unfroze those funds, and it funded a lot of what Iran was doing of evil in the world. It's a tragic moment in American foreign policy. So Iran being unwilling to back off of its nuclear program, and I think you know throughout history that whenever Iran got close, Israel just struck their facilities and backed them off. So they kept getting close, and then Israel would strike, and the world would yell and scream at Israel, but it would keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon. By the way, you might just at some point Google what a single nuclear weapon can do in terms of devastation. It could destroy entire nations. It could wipe out entire major cities. It could kill tens of millions of people. Don't think Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Think in terms of many, 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 many times that. So not only in Iran had there been an economy just collapsing, largely because of Western sanctions, but also because of horrible mismanagement by government. The people had arisen. There were riots happening in the streets. There were demonstrations. The regime responded, of course, by killing what we now know may be as many as 20 or 30,000 people, bodies stacked up in some streets. The Kurds led a lot of those demonstrations. The West kept trying to negotiate, kept talking to them, kept saying, we're coming, parked essentially an entire military city or two right off its shores. They knew what was going to happen, and they would not back off. So finally, February 28, 2026, the West struck. The deal was that Israel would strike the leaders, the United States and its allies would strike the facilities, and that's what's been happening. I think what tells the tale, quite frankly, is the way that Iran responded. It fired missiles in every direction. It has landed missiles in Lebanon. It has landed missiles in Dubai, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in some portions of Saudi Arabia, basically out in the desert, didn't do any damage. They have fired weapons at European installations and territory, at American installations and territory. The weapons didn't do any good when they fired them towards American areas because the U.S. has got its own version of mobile Iron Dome and simply shot those missiles out of the sky. We're very, very good at this. The American military is pretty stunningly awesome. But nevertheless, this is a tragic moment. People are dying. People are being killed. And Iran, I think now the Trump administration, and I'd like to talk about this as much as possible without having to bring Trump's personality into it. The Trump administration is talking about regime change. Secretary of War, he prefers Secretary of War as opposed to Secretary of Defense. Hegseth has said there will end up being boots on the ground to affect regime change. So, yes, some of you are already thinking what I'm going to say next, and that is that Trump ran against the idea of the U.S. getting in forever wars, and now, believe me, if we work for regime change in Iran, we will have forever wars, no question about it. We will be there for a long time and in very difficult geography and very difficult strategic position and very difficult political and religious region. It's going to be tough. Some more thoughts. You have probably heard that an Iraqi crowd attempted to take over the American embassy in Baghdad. I want you to be careful not to conclude that this means that Iraq is on Iran's side. Part of what's been going on in recent decades is that Iran, the more powerful of the two nations, has been exerting itself into Iraqi politics and control of Iraq through its Shiite clients, agents, and political forces. And there's been an attempt to make Iraq a client state of Iran. So when Iran wants to flex its muscle in Iraq, I know it's sometimes hard to keep those two names separate, but when Iran wants to flex its muscle in Iraq, it has crowds, it has politicians, it has militias, it has military forces. And it was flexing its muscle against the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Do not believe that this is the nation of Iraq coming against America because they are sympathetic with Iran. That is not true, not true. Most Iraqis are grateful for America. Most Iraqis are glad America has existed. The Kurds, certainly in the north, very pro-West, linked up with the NASDAQ as soon as they had control of their economic life, welcomed Western investment. I've told you before that many of the Kurds will actually not turn to Mecca to pray. They'll turn towards Jerusalem because of their history. There are hundreds of thousands of Kurdish Jews. There are 300,000 in Jerusalem alone. And so there's a little bit more of a mixed history, and there's an affection for Israel. I've told you before, I've walked down the halls of government in Erbil and seen rabbis coming the other way, emissaries from Israel. I mean, it's not what you would expect. It's not as it is in other Middle Eastern Islamic countries. So the Kurds are moderate, they're pro-Western. And so I don't want you to believe that Iraq is siding with Iran. That is not the case. There are factions, armed factions in Iraq that are under Iranian control, and that's what you're hearing are attacking the American embassy in Baghdad. Some of you will bring up, and I think you're right to do it, that the way the administration did this was the way it's been done before in American history, but is a violation of the Constitution. The reality is that it is the Congress that has the power to declare war, not a presidential administration. And that's exactly true. Here's the problem, and it's a serious one. This administration and other presidents have not trusted Congress or the press. So whereas in times past, trusted members of Congress would be taken aside, we're going to launch this attack, we're going to assassinate this certain leader who's evil and dictatorial, we're going to do a missile strike in a certain part of the world, that kind of thing, and they would take aside certain trusted senior members of Congress. Now, there's so little trust between the presidency, between the executive branch and the Congress in the United States that this administration refused to inform Congress in any clear, formal way. I think they took a few friends in Congress aside and let them know, but that was not official notification. And the reality is, and I'm saddened as I say these words, the reality is that the Trump administration believes that there are actual traitors to America in Congress. And they may be right. Had the Trump administration told Congress and formed the relevant committees, certainly informed the Congress as a whole, which you just can't do, there are people who are more committed to Middle Eastern countries, more committed to other nations who are, quite frankly, according to the Trump administration, outright traitors, and many who certainly would have beat a path to a camera and told the world what was going to happen. So if you're going to do a secure operation, if you're going to do a covert operation, or if you're going to hide your intention, and by the way, we didn't hide it that much. We moved an entire military city in the form of an aircraft carrier into the Gulf. They knew we were coming. But nevertheless, the times, the ways, the methods, the weapons, the president simply does not believe, his administration does not believe, and a man I trust very much, Marco Rubio, does not believe that he can inform Congress without outright traitors and egos betraying that information. And so, yes, it's absolutely true that Congress should have been consulted. Were they? Probably not, except for a few friends informally. And that's a disaster of pretty huge American political proportions. And it's a result of the fact that the two sides don't just not trust each other because of their political battles. The presidential administration, most of our security forces believe that there are outright traitors in Congress. And that's something, by the way, for Congress to deal with. Now, you'll want me to comment about the Kurds, and I love doing that. The Kurds are about 15% of the Iranian population, which is about 100 million people. And not the Kurds, by the way, the entire nation. And they are the moderate Muslims, as you know. They are pro-Western. They have led these demonstrations against the Iranian regime. Many of them have died. I'm grateful for them. I think they should be players at what comes next in Iran. You'll have a moderate people. You'll have a people who have lived out a history of being unified as Muslims. They have Sunni, they have Shiite, etc. They are people who know how to live in balance, so to speak, and I think they should be players. They are already players. They are dying by the hundreds. Maybe it'll end up being the thousands. Hopefully this slaughter of the Iranian population by its own government will end, and hopefully that's what a lot of this military incursion is about. I want to say one other thing that I think is extremely important, and you'll be learning as time goes on. There's going to be a lot to deal with here. And by the way, I think we're going to be involved in Iran for a long time, especially if, as Secretary Hegseth says, we're going to have boots on the ground. But not just for Christians, but for all of us, there's something that I think is critically important. And for us Christians, by the way, I don't mean to exclude anybody else listening to my podcast because I welcome you and you know that. But I think we understand this is spiritually significant, and that is Iran is the country of the world with the fastest growing Christian church. No question about it. I've told this story before. You can go back and listen to those earlier podcasts. There's no question that the fastest, as a percentage of population, the fastest growing Christian church in any nation has been in Iran. There is a youth movement. It is largely pro-Western. They are open to Christianity. They listen to Western broadcasts, can download things from the internet. I told you before that they go around in what basically are small groups in cars, and they drive around and worship and pray and listen to sermons in their language that have been generated largely in the West. And they stay in cars so they can't be tracked, so they can't be turned in by neighbors, etc. And it's ballooning. It's ballooning. And so I think spiritually this is important. I think that culturally this is important. I think Iran, the regime, felt the opposition from the youth, felt the opposition from the Kurds, felt the opposition from their people, and knew that there's a rising Christian movement, and frankly could hear footsteps, as they say in sports, could hear the clock ticking. And therefore they became even more radical. Obviously, this has proven to be a disastrous decision. So we need, those of you who are praying people, we need to pray. There's a lot of blood that could be shed here. There's for Americans, there's a lot of investment in a part of the country. We thought Iraq was a problem. We thought our involvement in Iraq or Afghanistan was a problem. This will be worse if we don't do it wisely. I maybe can't fault the Trump administration for not consulting Congress, because I agree there are outright traitors and egos in Congress that would have betrayed this and would have informed the other side. But I can fault the Trump administration for not having a real good plan for what comes next. Are you going to install the Shah's son? I've mentioned before in this podcast. Are you going to call for a representative government? You know that you're going to have insurgents. You're going to have violent opposition. You're going to have to fight a civil war. And by the way, we've already got that going on in Syria. We are not stable in Iraq. That is a failed state at this point. So the Trump administration has led us right into the belly of the Middle East, on the harder side of it, and is promising to put boots on the ground. I think that was unwise. We should have had a better plan. We should have had a better international coalition. I understand the impatience. I am opposed to this Iranian regime with every fiber of my being. I am pro the people. I am pro the Kurds. I am pro democracy in that part of the world, but it ain't coming overnight. So let's pray. Let's urge our people in Congress, the people, your senators, your congressmen, to hold the president's feet to the fire, not let ego and some kind of megalomania or some kind of search for legacy or some kind of desire to win the midterm elections to control foreign policy, because this could be really, really severe for the United States. Hopefully what we will do is pull down this regime, put a representative government in place in league with the Arab neighbors of Iran, and build a stable society long term. One final thought. I know I already said one final thought, but I'm like the preacher keeps saying just one more minute. I want you to be aware that Iranians are not Arabs. Iranians are from the Persian side of the Middle Eastern ethnic tree. And so part of the problem is that they are anti-Arab. And so what's going to happen is the U.S. is going to have to reach to Arab allies in the region and talk about what should happen with a largely Persian nation. So you've got two or three things going. You've got Shiite versus Sunni versus, again, Christian. You've got Persian versus Arab. You got every kind of division. And that's why, by the way, the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s was stunningly violent, one of the most violent wars in history per capita. So be aware that you've got serious, serious divisions. This is not like taking over. It's not like dealing with Venezuela, which would be easy. This is going to be difficult, and I'm not completely sure that Secretary Hegseth, President Trump, others appreciate this. I know that Marco Rubio does, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to sway things in the wisest direction. We are at a precipice of history. This is critical. Pray. Exercise what influence you can. We want wisdom. We don't want Americans there long term. We don't want American youth sent into meat grinders in an unwinnable war. But there's no question that we finally, thank God, after 47 years, had to strike Iran. I do believe that had Iran been unfettered with its nuclear power, you would have seen a nuclear explosion in Jerusalem. I don't think there's any question about that. One final thing, and I know I'm being ridiculous about this. I want you to be aware that there are sleeper cells all over the world. We've already had a shooting in Austin by a man who wore a T-shirt saying "Property of Allah," and his T-shirt also had an Iranian flag on it. We've already had people killed in Austin. It was at a bar, so some people think it was a bar fight, but that's not likely the case. It probably was a random shooting by an Iranian sympathizer. This is going to go on again. You're going to have sleeper cells. You're going to have explosions. You're going to have just wild-eyed shootings in city parks and on main streets. Be careful, be wise, be in prayer. We've stepped into a new era of history.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator in international media. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.